The city of Las Vegas, Nevada finally allows students back to school, and all it took was a spate of suicides from distraught kids who couldn't take the isolation of lockdowns. Seriously. I'm sure the clueless and insensitive teachers' unions will refrain from performing interpretive dances on those little kids' graves. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we head to Las Vegas, baby, where apparently death in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas, where the nation's fifth largest school district is set to reopen following a surge of student suicides thanks to the COVID lockdowns. You know, this is the insanity of what goes on in public schools, that they're so worried about kids dying that they could care less about kids killing themselves. Dying only registers to the public school teachers and teachers unions if you die from COVID. It seems that COVID is the only thing in the world we have to fear. COVID, which has been blown up into something much, much, much bigger than it ever had to be for kids and people who are the typical age to teach. It doesn't make any sense. The callousness here is all on the part of the schools. That, okay, dying from suicide, Before the show is over today, we're actually going to have a statement from a dad who lost his son to suicide, mocking the idea that suicide is the reason to keep the schools open. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. So this surge of student suicides, that doesn't really count as a serious health problem because, hey, better those kids kill themselves at home in their bedrooms than to go to school and kill themselves and maybe kill somebody else.
So Vegas did say they got the green light from Vegas, which is in Clark County. And as you said, it's the fifth largest district in the whole nation. And they got the green light to bring the students back as quickly as possible, according to what the New York Times was reporting. And they said this month the school board gave the green light to phase in the return of some elementary school grades and groups of struggling students, even as Greater Las Vegas continues to post huge numbers of coronavirus cases and deaths. And so when you look at science and statistics, those cases of death aren't correlating at all. It's not the students. Where you're seeing the children have death is these suicides, and where you're seeing the elderly, older populations have death, that's the COVID. So you can't use COVID to keep the kids at home. And so Vegas is saying, you know what, it's time. I guess they're basically being pressured into it. It's not like they want to.
At least they caved, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't ignore real death in the fear of fake death, right? So this is what you call getting owned. This is getting owned by COVID, right? Your manufactured terror over COVID, which, let's be very clear here, isn't about sickness and disease, because you can't possibly be that stupid to think that even the CDC and the World Health Organization now have said that the safest place for kids to be is in the schools.
Yeah.
So this has nothing to do with that.
And Jesus Hara, the Clark County superintendent, actually said, when we started to see the uptick in children taking their lives, we knew it wasn't just the COVID numbers we need to look at anymore. The uptick at all, there shouldn't have been an shouldn't have needed an uptick to cause that. But
can't you see teacher unions, people sitting around and going, damn it, another kid killed himself in Las Vegas. Don't you know this is going to force us to open the schools?
Sadly,
why can't these kids wait and kill themselves until after their prom or when they get to become freshmen in college? Why are these suicidal kids doing this to us? That's the attitude.
He also said, we have to find a way to put our hands on our kids, to see them, to look at them. They've got to start seeing some movement, some hope.
So you put your hands on them to see them.
Choice of wording was just not really good there.
Well, they're educators. Why would we expect literacy?
And then, we've talked about it many a time, student mental health, and how from day one of the COVID lockdown, how is this going to affect our kids? That's what we look at. Other teachers, everyone else is looking at how's it going to affect them.
That's it. How does this going to affect me? This is me firstism. And again, I go back to this, clearly the horrible situation that we see around this country. Kids being shut off, being shut out, kids being isolated in ways they never have been before, and no one's really doing a good job looking after them. And what's not helping, and as much as the isolation of the lockdowns, you can't tell me that this mass hysteria, treating COVID as if it were the bubonic plague, is not just driving kids way over the top socially and emotionally. More so than even the lockdowns is the hyper-inflated rhetoric coming from so-called educators about this. You are going to kill us. You want us to die, as we saw in yesterday's show, right? That you've got blood on your hands. Nice white parents are making black and brown-skinned people die. This kind of over-the-top, irresponsible electioneering, politics is what this is. Union rhetoric is what this is. Has nothing to do with anything in reality.
And it all comes back to our parents and then our teachers not instilling in our kids an understanding of critical thinking and how to reason out what is actually happening around them. So it's not the isolation, I think, that are, like you said, it's not that's getting our kids, because our kids are tuned to their devices all day long. They'd be fine with it. Kids used to wake up at noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon every day anyway, and then watch cartoons or do whatever. Well, they used to run around outside, but those were the old days. What's happening is that they now get on those devices, and like you said, they're just being told all this just anger and hysteria, and it's frightening them because they can't say, oh, that's a load of BS, that's hyperbole, that's exaggeration, and put it aside and live their life. This is their life.
It was a much more legitimate possibility in the 50s and 60s that there would be an H-bomb attack sooner or later. Think about the Cuban Missile Crisis. We came awfully close. And yet, forcing kids to drop, roll, and cover, to get under their desks, right, to have these...
Duck and cover.
These kinds of psychological fear-mongering, they were necessary in the 50s. And it was not nearly as shocking, not nearly as frightening, not nearly as shock to the system of little kids as what they're doing now over COVID, of which none of them are going to die from. And none of their parents and grandparents are probably going to die from it either. This kind of over-the-top fear-mongering, it is this culture of death that surrounds unions and teachers and public education. This hysteria you are pushing on kids. You're worse than the National Enquirer. Kids hear it again and again and again from their teachers, right? You're going to kill us. We're going to die. We're all going to die. Whatever happened to chin up, right? Keep calm, and the Brits
Carry
in World
on.
War II, right? Keep calm and study on. What happened to all of that? When did we become a nation of complete craving, spineless cowards, especially around our kids? I mean, when did it become okay to throw hysterical tantrums in front of our children, to not even be concerned with what they're seeing in their parents? It's just stupid is what it is. You're projecting your neuroses. Oh, my God, you have neuroses almost at the level of sociopathy, right? Some of these progressive neuroses. You're projecting them on your kids, and your kids then are taking it to heart. They don't know you're only half telling the truth. They don't know that you're exaggerating so that you don't have to do what you don't want to do. You like staying home and getting paid for it. They don't understand that you're using the virus to get personal and selfish things for yourself. And so hence they kill themselves. And in Las Vegas, they go back to school. And when they go back to school, everybody complains about it. This next story we're going to do, Katie, I can't even tell you how revolting this is.
All right, so just a hop, skip, and a jump away in Washington State, we have the president of the Pesco Association of Educators, named Scott Wilson. And they were at a school board meeting, and by at a school board meeting, I mean Zoom time. So on a school board meeting, I guess, on Zoom, they were talking about, reopening efforts, and he decided to claim that if we want to reopen our schools, that's white supremacy coming through. Racism. It's fueled by white supremacy. And if you're at all concerned about, lockdown suicides like in Las Vegas, then white privilege.
So this guy is actually going to tell the teachers union, his Zoom group, that
Zoom.
the excuse that kids are dying, the excuse that kids are killing themselves is white supremacy, and it's not true. He is somebody who, by his own admission, says his own child killed himself. And it is a bad reason to actually care about those things. Take a listen. You'll now know what I mean by the words revolting.
We must not ignore the culture of white supremacy and white privilege. We have seen it in the Free to Breathe, Reopen Everything, rodeos, and rallies that received county commissioner support. The same commissioner directs our health district. No one wants remote learning. No one wants remote learning, but it is the right thing to do. We know the equity concerns. Virus transmission is high, headed higher. With so many ignoring and avoiding measures to stop the spread, remote learning is the right decision.
And notice where he starts with politics. Without any explanation, without any proof, without any evidence, white privilege, right? Yeah, people are dying. Yeah, maybe everybody else is opening up. But, white privilege. We got to recognize white supremacy.
I struggled through that whole thing because he sounded like the emergency announcement guy. There's a tornado coming. Take shelter.
Well,
you are safest in a basement away from windows.
If he sounded like a robot there, listen to the Douche Dad of the Year award we're going to give him for this.
They complain their children are suicidal without school or sports. As a father daily surviving the suicide of my son, I find these statements ignorant and another expression of white privilege. Huge daily death tolls from this pandemic, seditious attacks at our Capitol, plus a new, more transmittable strain of the virus while our case numbers are rising again.
Did you hear what that douche did? At the very end, he equated insurrectional riots at the White House, right? The whole talk is about virus and how viral everything is and how dangerous it is. Then he throws it at the end, insurrections, right? Oh, and by the way, so you see where this guy's mind is. His mind is with the politics of the coronavirus, right? The coronavirus gave rise to white insurrectionists at the White House. I don't know. But you heard what he said. As the surviving father of a child who killed himself, it is absurd to open the schools because kids are killing themselves.
He did get pushback in a letter form that was posted on Facebook, and it says, after the alarming comments made by our PAE, President Scott Wilson last week, we can no longer stay silent. This is not a true representation of what we as teachers feel we sacrifice and strive to teach students of all colors, cultures, and backgrounds. And Wilson had said that COVID infections are more prevalent in Latinos because of multi-generational households. Uh-huh. He says, we need to ensure that the educational experience is equitable between remote and in-person, because if we're focusing on face-to-face without making our remote system robust, how about you make your face-to-face robust? But anyway, we're perpetuating inequities in educational opportunities that already exist.
Do you see these guys are empty suits? They're nothing but
come back and
gross generalizations, hugely racist understandings. Well, Latins are more likely to get it because they're all shacked up in caboose trains, right? They all live in the base. 47 Hispanics living in the basement of the sausage-making shore, right? That's your stereotype, you moron.
And we're living in an age where it's really down to two questions. You have to make a choice. We still are able to make a choice in this country. Just one, though. Whether you want your kid to be alive or to die. And it's all based on whether or not they go to school.
So you're seeing the theme of our show today, right?
Here's your choice.
Is your kids versus death.
So this is coming out of Alexandria City Public Schools in Virginia. And we've, for being Virginia, poor founders, Thomas Jefferson and all those other racists, I just feel bad for all of Virginia. What it used to be.
Virginia is suffering from a terminal case of Washington deism.
That is true. So Alexandria City Public Schools, the school board member named Margaret Lorber spoke on a Zoom meeting, because again, it has to be Zoom. Zoom meeting about the idea of reopening schools. And I'll just let you listen to what she has to say here.
Do you want your child to be alive or to be educated? And I think at this point in our lives, you have to speak out and take a position.
Notice the false parallel, right? That you can't square that circle. Either your kids will be alive or they will be educated. You can't have both. I'm a school teacher, and I'm telling you, you can't have both. You can have your kids alive unless you're Scott, whatever his name is, Wilson from Washington, who seems more than happy to let his kid die than to force kids back into the schools. And the false equivalency, right? People have been homeschooling for literally thousands of years. The founding fathers, who you mentioned, all of them were homeschooled. And you know what? Nobody died. There was no virus passed around. They did it. They were educated at a high level. Modern homeschoolers are kicking your public school butts, Mrs. Lorber, in terms of preparing kids for college and the world beyond. And they're doing it from home. You know, the thing about this is that prior to COVID, maybe we should thank COVID for this as well. I did a pour out last week. I was told by Mike, my producer, I can't do it again, but no. Maybe we should thank COVID for this as well. Prior to COVID, you never really heard teachers speak publicly. We almost had no experience with that. They never got on TV. They weren't. All these meetings they have were never televised. We almost never heard teachers speaking outside of the classroom. Now, thanks to COVID, you have a year of teachers and principals and superintendents speaking out about education. I hope you recognize how vile, how stupid, how manipulative they all sound. These teachers are not people. These superintendents, these administrators are not the least bit interested in your kids' education. They're interested in their own hides and skins. We should thank COVID for one thing. We now know the timber and the caliber of many American school teachers, and it ain't good. And it's not something you ought to send your kids back to if you don't have to.
Yeah, but we also know that, sadly, most Americans are tired and easily forget things, and
pay no attention.
As soon as that opportunity comes for your kid to go back to school, you're just going to send them, even though you just heard that kid's teacher for months not teaching your kid.
Yep.
But that's okay. Shoo on, little child.
And you've seen the politics and the venality. You've seen these teachers willing to hold your kids, their lives in terms of isolation and suicide, hold it hostage to your white privilege, mom and dad. And so, by all means, send your kids back to that school system as soon as it opens. But there are other alternatives, you know, where you can, unlike Mrs. Lorber, where you actually can keep your kid alive and give him or her a real good education. That used to be called parenting. Not anymore, I guess.
No. Well, Lorber, just so everyone knows, did later apologize for the statement and said that, I guess I'll take this opportunity to just apologize. One of the things I'm feeling is depressed and embarrassed currently for my colleagues, because in a way, I feel like there apparently were a lot of letters that came in, made it sound like they thought, like I read through, was what actually the whole school board thought. And she did point out that she's amazed at the level of venom that she received in some of the emails that she got. And she acknowledged, which is true, that everything gets put on social media. So whatever you've said gets amplified and misrepresented 50 different ways. And if you listen to her whole thing and maybe the way she spoke about it, it was a stupid statement to say. But she's also was kind of trying to point out and grapple with, well, here's what's the current climate around us. She shouldn't have said, do you want your kid to be alive or to be educated? But okay, well.
But she did. And so what you're trying to suggest, I think, is that she is a slightly more reflexive person than we got from that clip, and I'm willing to believe that's true. The fact that she was pounced on by other so-called educators and was treated very vilely tells you again what I said before. If there is one thing we can thank COVID for, it now has shown us as a country the timber of a good percentage of our public school teachers and their administrators. For the last 3 weeks, we've seen nothing but it. Lecturing us from beaches in the Caribbean about we can't go out while they're out there partying. Doing interpretive dance, right, as a way of protesting, having to actually go and teach little kids how to dance. The level of intransigence that we've seen here at every level of the public school system shows you what a completely rotten system it is. And again, it's going to open sooner or later. The question is, have you had enough?
It's time now for some real education. Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged in 1957. It was her last and her longest novel. Rand describes the book as an examination of the role of man's mind in existence. It's a dystopian novel set in the United States that lays out Rand's ideas about objectivism.
Yeah, dystopian month continues. We're doing this in response to the inauguration of Joe Biden, the way that the media and the big tech companies radically influenced this election by putting more than their thumb, their whole bodies on the scale and pushing votes, shifting votes, the way that you had a unilateral narrative across the Democrat Party line with Hollywood, with academia, with tech companies, all conspiring to change the outcome of the election, and the fact that you have tens of thousands of complaints about voter fraud and impropriety that never have been investigated. Now, I'm not saying they're true, but there's a whole lot to look at, and no one wants to look at it. So here we are considering what happens when powerful forces like corporations and government and academia team up to turn this into a one-party country, to take away real choice when it comes to government. And Ayn Rand, of course, was a master of this. She was one of the great, of all the 20th century writers, dystopian writers, she was the one that understood the power of the individual more than anybody else. More than what you're really fighting here with globalism and socialism on the left is the problem of collectivism. Individuals don't matter, only the collective matters. This is the problem with socialism and Marxism. The individual pays a huge price in liberty and freedom to the collective. The collective has the will, the individual is the pawn, and nobody. Rand actually once said, when will people realize that the largest minority in the world is the individual? Here's a quote from Atlas Shrugged about the same problem. Quote, "The greatest guilt of today is that of people who accept collectivism by moral default." I call them Democrats. The greatest guilt of today is that of people who accept collectivism by moral default. The people who seek protection from the necessity of taking a stand by refusing to admit to themselves the nature of that which they are accepting. The people who support plans specifically designed to achieve serfdom and slavery for the American people, but hide behind the empty assertion that they are lovers of freedom with no concrete meaning attached to the word. The people who believe that the content of ideas need not be examined. The words matter, not the ideas, that principles need not be defined, and that facts can be eliminated by keeping one's eyes shut. They expect, when they find themselves in a world of bloody ruin and concentration camps, to escape moral responsibility by wailing, "But I didn't mean this." Yes. I fought white privilege I fought white privilege by getting rid of the First Amendment. I fought white supremacy by getting rid of the Second Amendment. Now we're all in concentration camps. I didn't mean this. She had a pretty good idea what was coming. All those cowards out there that are willing to sell down the heritage of liberty and freedom because of fear-mongering from leftist agitators, you're going to pay a big price like everybody else.
All right, just a reminder to please download our brand new Freedom Project Media app on your smart device. You're going to be able to watch all of our videos, including everyone's favorite Healthy Republic, done by me. And you also get in-depth interviews, all of our lectures, educational animations, and so much more. Simply search Freedom Project wherever you download apps and make sure, please, to allow for notifications. And if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club. And we're going to send you a signature tumbler. It's just a wee little thank you. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now, we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. If you have a dog, that dog probably sniffs with its left nostril. Dogs will start sniffing with their right nostril, but if the smell is pleasant, it will shift to the left nostril.
I'm definitely a left nostril guy. And that wraps up this show. Now make sure you go to download the Freedom Project app. Look, this is a way around tech censorship. We have an app, all you have to do is download it, and we will cut out the middleman. Not through Facebook, not through Twitter. You can get directly from us to you, with love, a Freedom Project show like this one. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. Until next time, stay educated and download the app, please.